All right, hi everyone. For those of you who don't know who we are, my name is Fahad, and beside me is Allison, and we are the CS100 I-Series for this term. I'm just going to tell you about how this review session will work. Is that for the first hour or so, we're going to briefly overcap all the content that will be tested on the final exam, and then for the second hour or so, we're going to open the floor for any questions that you may have. So I ask if you can keep all your questions to the end. And we are also recording this lecture, this review session. So you don't necessarily need to take notes, but if you would like to, then by all means go right ahead. And without further ado, let's get started. So hopefully you all know that your exam is this upcoming Saturday from 7:30 to 10 o'clock. It should be in PAC, and I should say Quest and not Odyssey, because it is an online exam. It will be completely written. Most of it will be short answers, and there are no computers or calculators allowed, or any other special aids, unless you have accommodated something with accessibility services. The exam will comprise of 10 sections, each worth 15 marks, and only your best 8 sections will be counted. So realistically, you don't have to complete the exam, you complete 8 sections, but if you would like to do so, then again, go for it. The questions cover information from all the modules except module 11. So anything about privacy and security, that is not on the exam. As I said, there are 10 sections, so each section relates to one module that we talked about. Right. So modules 1, 2, and 3 talk about your device, your computer. And it relays information concerning how the information in your computer is structured and is stored, what really makes up your computer, the computer organization, and the network organization, how your computer communicates with other devices through the internet. So module 1, we talked about 2 different types of information, discrete information and continuous information. Discrete information, just a little recap, is information that has limited precision because there is a limited number of decimal places that can go to. So for example, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5, there is no number in between. Whereas continuous information, it has a limitless amount of decimal places we can go towards. So for example, temperature can go to 24.5678912 degrees. But because of that, we discretized information from continuous information to something that's discrete. 2 reasons why we do it is just for convenience sake, and another reason why is because computers cannot actually incorporate an infinite amount of information. Understanding that a bit of memory video is really vital for what's to come next, but just a little summary of it is that computers operate in what is known as binary numbers. A number can either be 0 or 1. If you like to think about it as a light switch analogy, it can either be on or off. And you should know the difference between a bit and a byte. So a bit is a 1 binary digit, and a byte is a combination of 8 bits. So you should also know how to convert between decimal numbers to binary and binary to hexadecimal and so forth. All of these conversions will be done without using a calculator, so these conversions won't be too difficult to do in your head mentally. And the chart on the right will be provided on the exam, so you don't need to memorize all the nitty-gritty detail. So we're just going to practice some of these conversions that you can expect on the exam. So converting from a binary number to a decimal number. How I would go about doing this step is I would first write the binary number on the top row, and underneath it, because we know binary operates in powers of 2, I'll write the powers of 2 in increasing order from right to left, and underneath that you can write what each power of 2 would equal. My next step would be to look across the first row where my binary number is, and look for all the ones, all the columns that have the binary digit of 1, and then I would add what those powers of 2 would equal. Pretty straightforward. All right, we're just going to do another example. So again, write your binary number on the top row. Underneath it, you should write the powers of 2 in increasing order from right to left, and underneath it you can write what it equals. And then look for the binary digit of 1 on the top row, and then you would add up all of those values that have the binary digit of 1. Now doing the opposite, converting from a decimal to a binary number. This is how I would go about doing this step is we wouldn't have the first row just yet. So again, you would write the powers of 2 in increasing order from right to left. Again, write down what the value of that power of 2 would equal on the bottom. And then look at the highest power of 2 value that can be subtracted from a decimal value. So in this case, we have a decimal value of 184, and we look across and we find that 128 is the highest power of 2 value that can be subtracted from 184. And so I would write a 1 on top, and I'll subtract 128 from 184, and get a new value of 56. Then I would repeat the process, look for the highest power of 2 value that can be subtracted from 56, which 64 cannot because it's greater, so I'll write a 0 on top. I found that it's 32, and then I subtracted from 56, which will give me a new value of 54. And you repeat this step on and on until you eventually get a value of 0 at the end. Next conversion could be converting from a hexadecimal value to one that is decimal. Now, this is very similar from converting from binary to decimal, but instead of using a power of 2, you're using a power of 16. And same process, you will write down your your hexadecimal digits on the top row. Underneath it, you would write down the powers of 16 in increasing order from right to left. We probably won't be asking you a high value of, or a power of 16 to the 3. Most likely we're going to be asking you one with only 3 hexadecimal digits. So you really need to know only to 16 to the power of 2. But in this example, we're going to go to 16 to the power of 3. And again, you write down what each value of that power will equal at the bottom. And now the next step would be to take the hexadecimal digit and then you multiply it with the power of 16. But you should remember that hexadecimal only goes from 0 to 9, and afterwards it goes to A, B, C, D, and E, and F, which all correspond to 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So, looking at our table, our value of E corresponds to the value of 14. We do 14 times 16 to the power of 0, which is just 1. And then we add it to the next set. So 7 times 16 to the power of 1 plus A, which corresponds to the value of 10 times 16 to the power of 2 plus 6 times 16 to the power of 3. And if you add up all of those, it should give you your decimal value of 27,262. Now the last one you can expect is converting from a hexadecimal digit to a binary digit, and by far this is one of the easiest ones in my opinion. What you're going to do is, again, you can write your hexadecimal digits on the top row, and then the next step would be to look at your table for your hexadecimal digit, which our first one would be 6, and then you look at the corresponding binary value, which is 0110. And then you repeat this process over until you get this humongous binary value at the bottom. Right? Now, Module 2 talked about computer organization, so what really makes up your computer. And there are really two things that compose your computer, the hardware components and the software and operating system. Now, the hardware components are 3 primary hardware components that you should be concerned about and you should focus, they being the CPU, the memory, and peripherals. On the other hand, the software, you need to understand the difference between an application program and a system program and how each one functions. Additionally, know the three main components of an operating system, so the kernel, the shell, and the prefrontal applications, and what each purpose is. Module 3 talks about the network organization, so how your computer, again, communicates with other devices. You should know the difference between synchronous communication and asynchronous communication. Synchronous communication, just a little recap, is when a message is sent and received at the same time and there is no delay. Asynchronous communication, on the other hand, is when there is a delay for when the message is sent or received. And this delay can be very small, minute, it can be in seconds, minutes, or this delay can be very large, it can be hours or weeks. You also need to know how the layers of communication work. And using the postcard analogy, there are three layers of communication that we talked about. The lower layer using the postcard analogy would be the words written on the postcard. The middle layer would consist of how that postcard would get sent from the sender to the receiver, somewhat of the postal service. And the higher layer of communication would be the words, understanding what the words written on the postcard means, the semantics. Now you need to bring those layers of communication into the context of the internet, and I'll just briefly discuss what they are. So the physical layer would be the lowest layer, and there are 4 different physical layers that you should be concerned about, how devices are used to communicate on the internet. They being Wi-Fi, Ethernet, cable modems, and LTE and 4G. You also need to know how the middle layer works, the TCP and IP address. So IP address, as a little recap, is a set of 4 numbers that are separated by a period. And you should also be able to explain the listed items below, so DNS, DHCP, NAT, IP routing, and the higher layer protocols, HTTPS, SFTP, and that last item. You don't really need to know about it in great detail, just know more of it in a broad sense. Just know that IMAP is used for email. So TCP, just as we discussed in the module, is a protocol in which a message that's going to be sent is broken down into little packets, and then when it is received by the sender, it is reassembled again. And you should know how the layers of communication relate to each other and how to function. So modules 4, 5, and 6 talk about Excel. Now, since this is a written exam and you're not going to be using your computer, we're not really going to ask you for more of the procedural steps. We're just asking to see if you know what to do in certain Excel situations. So this module, we're going to be talking about referencing, functions, graphs, and tables and pivot charts. So there are 3 ways to reference a cell. The first and easiest way is to use relative referencing, in which you are just using the letter and the number associated with that cell. So for example, P2. Absolute referencing is when you are either blocking the column, the row, or the cell itself by using the $sign. So if you were to lock the cell, you would use $B, $2. And if you were just to only lock the column, you would just write $D, 189. The last way to reference a cell is by using names, and this is a fantastic way to reference cells. One reason is it absolutely references a cell. The second reason being, if you were to show it to someone who has never really seen Excel in their life before, they can easily understand your spreadsheet by just understanding the name of it. And please, 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 I urge you not to use values. It's just not good practice to use values. And if, for example, you had a situation in which you had to change a value, for example, your unit price, your formula wouldn't encounter it if you just used the old previous value straightforward. So functions, we're going to be talking about the 3 different types of values that can be inputted into a function and that is getting outputted. So numbers, it's just numbers, so it can be the number 42. Strings and labels have letters and words associated with them. So for example, hello, your total is, and so forth. And Booleans is a set of 2 values, so it can either be true or false, yes or no. So you do need to know your basic functions that we use throughout the term. For example, sum, count, some of the ones you kind of saw repeated over and over throughout the assignments. You also need to know your parameters. Again, if you're running on paper, it won't say, hey, you need this parameter, this range. You need to know your parameters along with your functions. Of course, the more obscure functions that we're going to use, a lot like the lookup, we are providing you with those parameters, but you need to know what type of values to put in that situation. And then you also need to understand the difference between a function and a formula. A formula is whenever you put an equal sign, that is a formula, and a function is when you're using sum and whatnot. They can either be one function in a formula or they can be multiple functions, and some answers on the exam may require multiple functions, just keep in mind. And these are some of the functions that were mostly discussed throughout the term. You can probably get a good understanding about them and what parameters they have. And just note that if you were in the last point, if you were to use, if you look up and your inexact match is true, the value always rounds down. All right. So for graphs, we talked about these 4 different types of graphs. Again, we're not going to be asking you to draw a graph, but you should know what type of graph will be best used to display certain data. So for column charts, it's for more numerical comparisons. Line charts are showing changes over time. Percentage is, pie charts are used for percentages, and scatter plots are more if you want to look for trends or scientific data. The goal seek tool was used in the what if analysis, and this is a great tool if you want to find a desired outcome given a certain formula. You just need to know what type of parameters and would go where and what values you should be putting for that. Finally, the pivot tables and the pivot charts are great for 2 main reasons. One being that it can easily rearrange the data in any way that you would like, and the last being that you can use filters to hide certain data or to highlight more data that you want to be seen. All right. So that's the end of my part, and I'm going to be giving to Allison to talk about more of the HTML, CSS in the later half of this course.
So I'm going to start talking about modules 7, 8, and 9 that discuss HTML, cascading style sheets, and dynamic web pages. So what I'm going to be talking about with you guys today and what you should focus your studying on for the exam is how to start a web page, the important tags that we went over in the course and how to use them, how you implement style by linking to a cascading style sheet and using style tags, how to create and use classes and IDs, so that would be divs, spans, and tags. I'll go over the hex color code system, which was actually discussed in module 1, but we're talking about it here because it is a great style tool for your web pages, and I'll also do a brief overview on dynamic web pages and how they work. So starting off with how to create an HTML web page. So the tags that you need to create an HTML web page are the doc tag, the HTML tag, the head tag, the title tag, and the body tag. So important to note here, as you see, the head tag, the title tag, the body tag, and the HTML tag they're all what we call paired tags, meaning that they also require a closing tag. So the only unpaired tag in this situation is the doc type tag, which doesn't require closing tag. So again, some more important tags that are paired, meaning they also require the closing tag, just the headers tag, how to add italics and bold in your web page. So for headers, you can have H1, H2, H3, and so forth. And what these tags do is they increase the size of the font and they also bold it. So that H1 would be larger than H2, H2 would be larger than H3, and so forth. To italicize text, we use the emphasis or EM tag, and to bold text, we use the strong tag. And just a note here, the title of a document cannot be styled with the emphasis or strong. So if you were to try and italicize or bold the title of your web page, it wouldn't work, and it would just show the actual tags and wouldn't implement the style. So please make sure that you're not trying to add those tags to the title. Continuing with lists, so we have ordered lists and unordered lists. Ordered lists display 1, 2, 3, and an unordered list displays with bullet marks. So the OL and UL tags are both paired and require the closing tag. Within these tags, each list item is specified using the LI tag, which is unpaired and does not require a closing tag after each tag. There's also tables. So the table tag, you can also specify the border within it, and the table tag does require a closing tag. Within the table tag, you can specify what is going to go in each table row, and you can specify what is going to go in each table cell. So you can see each row is represented with the TR tag, and each cell is represented with the TD tag, neither of which require a closing tag. There's also links and emails. So these look very similar, the only difference being that with the email tag, you include the mail to within the link portion. So what these tags do is they link to either a web page, or they link to set you up with a direct email to a certain email address. So you would add these into your web page using the href tag, and you can specify the text that you'd like to show up over the link. So when people click on it, they know who they're emailing, or they know what website they're going to. We use these a lot in your web pages, so you should be familiar with the syntax for each of these tags. Now we're going on to unpaired tags that do not require closing tags. So the first is images, and I want to first go over the difference between a local and an external image, just because there was a lot of confusion throughout the term with this. So a local image, I want you to think of the image of yourself or a celebrity or anything that you uploaded a module to. So you uploaded that photo directly from your computer to the server, and then that image was pulled from the server onto your link, so onto the internet. So there, when the image is being pulled from a server, it's considered local, and when an image is being pulled from the internet, it's considered external. So an external image, you would be referencing a link. So you can see here, the external image is pulling from the internet, whereas the local image is it's just a file name, because that file would be in your server. So along with your HTML document, maybe your CSS file, you would also be uploading that image. So with each of these photos, you can also specify the desired height. You can also do desired width, and you can also specify alternative text in the case that the photo doesn't appear, which could be a result of, for an external image, the photo being taken off the internet. For an internal image, local image, that would be the photo maybe being taken out of the server, or even if people try and access a photo on a different device or browser, sometimes the file won't appear, so that's when it's great to have alternative text. So in this case, the word eagle would appear in place of the logo of the goose. So some more unpaired tags are paragraph, line break, and horizontal rule tags. So the paragraph tag splits text and adds space between them. The line break tag, the BR tag, splits text but does not add any space between the lines. And the horizontal rule, or the HR tag, adds space between text, and it also adds a horizontal line. So the last important tags are div and span. So for the purposes of this course and this exam, it's just important to know that you would use a div tag to apply to vertical elements of a web page, and you would use a span tag to apply style to horizontal elements of a web page. So if I wanted to apply style to an entire paragraph or half of my web page that would span multiple lines, I would be using a div. If I wanted just one line or maybe even one word or one sentence, it would be best to use a span to apply style. So moving on to cascading style sheets. There's two ways to apply style to your web page. So that would be linking to your cascading style sheet, which you can see on the left here, and also directly within the HTML file, which is on the right here. So to link to your cascading style sheet, you would use the link tag, and you would specify style sheet, and then you would add the name of your CSS file. So in this case, it's styles.css, but that placeholder there is just whatever you name your CSS file. And the alternative is to add all style directly within the HTML file, in which you would use the style tag and add all of your style within that pair tag. So there are three main ways to define a style attribute, and that is using tags directly. You can also use classes, and you can use IDs. So you can see here the tag used is the H1 or header 1 tag, and the font size and colors have been adjusted. You can also use classes, in which you would add a period before the class name, and IDs, where you would use the pound or the hashtag before the ID name. So on this slide, you can see this is what the style from the previous slide would look like when applied. So the header has the largest font size, and it's been changed to color red. The class has a medium font size, and it's been changed to the color green. And the ID has the smallest font size, and it's been changed to the color blue. So those are just three different ways that you can apply style to your web page. So again, hex colors were discussed in Module 1, but they're really relevant to everything taught in Module 8, and we use them a lot in Module 8, which is why we're discussing them here. So we're not going to ask you on the exam for the specific hex code for, light green or magenta, but it is important to know how the hex color code system works, and that it is an RGB system in which it's varying intensities of the colors red, green, and blue. You should know the basics of that, and the basic color codes being that 000 represents black, and FFF represents a full intensity of red, green, and blue, which would output the color white. So the code F00 is a full intensity of red, so it would give you the color red. 0F0 is a full intensity of green, and would give you the color green. And 00F is a full intensity of blue, and would give you the color blue. The other four on this slide are just examples of other color codes, but we're not going to ask you specific color codes. Just know how the hex color system works. Another important thing that we talked about in Module 8 is the layout properties of a web page. So it's important to know the order and how you can manipulate each of these properties to improve the style and appearance of your web page. So from the middle outwards, you have the content, and then in between the content and your border is the padding. So you can adjust the space. So all of your text, images, everything you include on your web page is in the content. So you can adjust the space between your text and web page properties by adjusting the padding. Then you can have your border, and then the space between the outside of your web page and the border is considered a margin. And all of these properties, margin, border, and padding, you can adjust the width of them to improve the appearance of your web page. So moving on to Module 9, we discussed dynamic web pages. So by definition, a dynamic web page changes automatically due to its environment. There are two types of dynamic web pages. There are server-side and client-side dynamic web pages. So server-side dynamic pages are modified by the web server. So a good example of this is Google. You type in your whatever you want to search for, and then Google behind the scenes does all this work and outputs your results for you. So that's the web server modifying the page. And you can think of client-side dynamic pages are when the page is modified by the web browser. So a great example of these are the web pages that you made for your Module 9 assignment. You have your quiz, the web browser, whoever's on the web page is clicking their quiz options, and then they're given a result. So that's them modifying the page to give them a result. You don't need to know anything in depth about JavaScript. All you need to know is that dynamic web pages use JavaScript, and that's what makes them dynamic. But you won't be asked anything specific about JavaScript or anything about how to code with JavaScript. There's also cookies and query strings. So cookies and query strings are used to kind of track your browsing behavior. A lot of websites use cookies as a way to see what you're looking at on the web page, how much time you're spending on each page. So kind of just all of your browsing activity. And query strings are used to kind of figure out how you arrive to a page. So track where you're going on the internet and how you're moving between web pages. It's also important to note here that although some dynamic web pages can appear to be synchronous, they are in fact asynchronous because there is always a time lag, even though it may appear to be happening very quickly. But a new code is always launched in response to a page loading. So any form of dynamic web page is an example of asynchronous communication. So now I'll talk about the last module covered on the exam, Module 10. So before we can really talk about search engines, we have to kind of take a step back and look at what is the internet or the World Wide Web and how does it function. So the World Wide Web quite literally is a web. So you have different web pages, or as we refer to in this course, nodes. So in this web here, you can see each node is given a number and represents a different website. And they're all connected through links, which are usually just hyperlinks. And spiders kind of crawl between all these web pages, and you can determine how important or how relevant a page is by looking at how many different web pages link to it. So in this situation, web page 6 would be the highest ranked web page because it has 4 web pages linking to it. But another thing that can also affect page ranking and the reputability of a page is if important websites link to other websites. So in this case, node 6 or web page 6 is linking to page 1. So page 1 would increase the ranking of that page just due to the fact that a very credible web page is linking to it. So in this situation, web page 6 would be ranked, and then it would be 1, and then it would be 3, and so forth, just going off of how each web page is linking to each other. So now we can look at how the internet is indexed. And so spiders, I mentioned before, spiders are kind of crawling between all these web pages. So we're talking now about the flight spiders. So flight spiders are very focused, which means that when they're kind of crawling the internet, they're looking for web pages, and if they're noticing that they're getting a little off topic or where they're going isn't relevant anymore, they'll abandon that and they'll get back on track and keep looking for what they want to find. They're also very polite, so they respect the rules of web pages. They don't overload any servers. So in terms of revisit frequency, they don't keep going to the same web page over and over because that just overloads the server and can slow down your search results. They also respect paywalls, so you can think of a newspaper subscription. Spider will go to this newspaper website and it'll see, oh, there's a paywall. It'll still look at the content, but it won't return any of that information in your search because it respects that paywall and it says, okay, I'm going to look at this content, I'll give this search result because it is relevant, but I'm not going to give any information past the paywall. Because if the user wants that information, they'll have to pay. Dynamic content is, you think of a Google search, every single time you're searching, you're getting a different result depending on what you're looking for. So those spiders they're crawling the web to gather the best information so that your search is relevant, and they use query strings to kind of see how you're looking through web pages and to see how people are moving. Like if they go to web page 1, 2, and 3 in that order every time, those web pages are probably related, and they'll use that information to better tailor their searches. So just looking behind the scenes, we talked a lot about this, and you did a lot of work for this in your Module 10 assignment. So we talked about lists of occurrences. So if a word is listed in spots 1, 2, 4, 8, 10 on a web page, that'll increase the chances that it'll be returned for a search than if a word is only mentioned in places 3 and 4. Just because it notices like, oh, this is talked about multiple times, this page is probably about that topic. So the more something occurs and the placement of its occurrence can really influence search results. Functions and hyphens. So you think of the word email versus e-mail. Google or search engine recognizes that these words are essentially the same thing. You're kind of looking for the same meaning by using them. So it'll index them very similarly. Foreign languages and accents. You can think of Beyonce. So when you actually spell Beyonce, it should have an accent over the last E. A lot of people don't include that when they're searching for that. Google and search engines recognize that, and they'll index those words the same. That happens a lot with foreign languages, just because, not so much in English, but you think of it in French, there's a lot of accents used. You don't technically have to include those. Google knows that if you're searching a word without the accent, you're usually looking for a word with the accent. There's stop words, so those are words like the, it, and is, which if those were to be indexed, your search results would be way off because every page uses those words, every sentence uses those words pretty much. So those are not, when you put those in the search bar, they are not included in the search. There's word variants, so sell, sells, sold, selling. Those are all different ways and tenses of pretty much looking for the exact same word. So Google will index those the same. There's spelling variants, so color versus color, the American spelling versus the Canadian spelling. Google picks up that and knows that whether you put color with or without the U, that you're looking for the same thing. Synonymy, you can think of that as different words that have the same meaning. So big versus large versus huge. If you search for a big house, you'll also get results for a large house or a huge house because all of those words have the same meaning. And there's polysemy, which is same word with different meanings. So you can think of the Bank of Montreal versus a riverbank. So when you search for that, it looks at the words surrounding the word bank. So when you search for the Bank of Montreal, you're not going to get results for a riverbank. And if you search for a riverbank, you're not going to get results for the Bank of Montreal because Google picks up the different usage of the same word. So we talked a bit about polite spiders. There's also evil spiders, which their main focus is on scraping and stealing content and stealing emails. So if you ever get spam email, things like that, it's usually because an evil spider has stolen your email from a web page and has sold it to the third party that is now sending you email. So these spiders they aren't really focused. They don't respect the rules. They don't respect paywalls. So they're responsible for a lot of information, personal information being stolen from web pages. We also phrases with more than one word. So in your Module 10 assignment, we have the example big blue whale. So when you're searching for a phrase with more than one word, Google or the search engine you're using first searches for each of those words individually. So look for big individually, blue individually, and whale individually. And then kind of looks at their occurrences, how many times they're mentioned in a web page, where they're mentioned together, and then based off of those results, we'll return the best match. So obviously if those words are mentioned in order, so if they're position 1, 2, 3 on a web page, that's going to rank a lot higher than if they're all mentioned separately. Page ranking, so a lot of different things can affect the rank of a web page. The main ones being the HTML elements, so having a relevant title, a relevant head, all of those things can increase a page ranking. Web pages can be penalized for having excessive ads, bad HTML elements for numerous reasons. A web page's ranking could be lowered. And web pages can also be rewarded for having good content, a lot of web pages linking to it, good HTML elements, not too many ads. There's a lot of things that web page can be rewarded for. So there are 5 main ways that search results can be manipulated. So the first one is hidden text, and that's when, for example, you put white text on a white background or black text on a black background, so that the user or the viewer of that web page can't see that information, but when a spider would go to that web page and search for content, it would still register that that is content on the web page. So that's a way that people try and boost their page ranking. There's also aggregators. So an aggregator would be a web page that just has a bunch of different content all thrown together. So again, the spiders look and they'll say, oh, this web page has content about this, about this, about this. So that would result in the web page being returned or given in a search result, given as a result of a search result for a lot of different things. There's also link farms. So you think back to the web that we had in the first slide. You see web pages 1 through 7. So imagine if web pages 1 through 7 were all owned by the same person, and they've set up so that all of those web pages are linking to one another. So each web page has 6 links going into it. So because they each have 6 links going into it and they're each linking each other, those would be viewed as more important, but in reality, it's just a bunch of useless web pages linking to one another. There's website hijacking. Website hijacking occurs when, usually in the comment section of a very reputable web page, someone will link to their own web page that's usually not as reputable, but again, when the spiders are crawling through the internet, they see, oh, this really important web page links to this web page, so this web page must also be really important. So it's kind of a way to throw off the spiders, and they think that that important web page is linking the other web page, and that will result in it having a higher ranking. And lastly, there's Google bombs. Those are usually done for comedic purposes. So in this course, we use the example of George Bush, and so when the word miserable failure was searched for, there were results for George Bush. So again, it's just a search result giving unrelated results that are usually pretty funny. Okay, and then lastly, there's a lot of different symbols that you can improve your search results. So the first one is the dash. So if you were to use a dash, whatever the word that you put after the dash would be omitted from your search result. So for example, if I was searching for cars and I really didn't want a Honda, I would put cars for sale dash Honda, and that would omit any web page that mentions Honda. You can also use quotes, and anything that you put within the quotes, any phrase you put within the quotes, gets searched for in that exact order. So for example, the Module 10 assignment, if you were to search for big blue whale, all in quotes, it would only look for those words in that exact order. So it wouldn't index each of those words individually, it would look for the entire phrase together. You can use the @ symbol, and that would find social tags, so that's a great way to find someone's social media, their Instagram, their Twitter, so all the social tags relating to phrase or word. You can also use the OR operator, so that would return pages that might use several words. So if you think about searching for a car and you wanted a Mazda or a Toyota, you can do cars for sale Mazda or Toyota. And you can also use the pound symbol or the hashtag, and that would find popular hashtags for trending topics. So again, more of a social media application of search results. And again, Module 11 is not going to be tested on the exam, so it's just information up to Module 10. So in terms of preparing for the exam on Saturday, the best way to go about it is review the modules. The videos and the transcripts have a lot of really important information in them. Go over your assignments, complete the study packets that we've posted on Learn. Remember, the answers aren't posted, so if you have specific questions about certain questions, please feel free to email us, and also just come to our office hours. We'll be sticking around until noon today, and we'll also have office hours Wednesday through Friday from 11 till noon. So good luck on the exam. Thank you for coming, and we hope this was helpful.